They said the 42nd floor conference room of King and Crown was the coldest place in Manhattan, not because of the temperature. The climate control was flawless, but because of the man who ran it, Nathaniel King, a billionaire by 35, a ghost. In every boardroom, a name whispered in the halls of power. Men feared him. Women tried to tame him. Neither succeeded. He wasn't cruel, just distant, unreachable. Like the stars. Today, though, the room wasn't cold. Because of Nathaniel. It was cold. Because of the contract sitting on the table. A surrogate agreement. Finalized. Legal. Complete. Everything he needed was here. The agency had selected a flawless candidate vetted for health, intelligence, compliance. She had signed her willingness to carry his child, and no questions asked a child. Before we dive in, take a moment to drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? I love seeing how far these stories reach across the globe. And if this one already has you hooked, don't wait, hit that subscribe button now. I've got another powerful story dropping tomorrow, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. Now, let's get into it. The one thing Nathaniel couldn't buy, manufacture, or inherit: 3 failed relationships, 5 years of trying, endless blood tests, consultations, whispered conversations in back corners of exclusive clinics. Nothing, his last wife had said. You care more about legacy than love. And maybe she was right. Nathaniel didn't want a family. He wanted a future, an heir, someone who would carry the name he built from dust into gold. And now, finally, that process was beginning. His mother sat across from him, pearls shining against her navy Chanel suit. Victoria King, sharp as ever at 73, reviewed the paperwork like it was a merger agreement. She'll be here shortly, she said, her voice clipped, composed. The agency says she meets all requirements. Young, educated, clean medical history. Nathaniel didn't respond. He was staring at the skyline. Midtown Manhattan glinting in the glass like a city made of mirrors and ambition. I know what you're thinking, Victoria continued. You're wondering if this is the right path. If it's cold, transactional. He turned slightly. It is. She met his eyes. Good, because it should be. But Nathaniel wasn't so sure anymore. He had built an empire on contracts and clauses, on people being predictable. But something about this felt off. Maybe it was the idea of a woman carrying his child. A woman he'd never touched, never kissed, never spoken to. A woman who would experience the most intimate transformation a body could endure, and do it for a check. A soft knock broke the silence. His assistant opened the door. She's here, sir. Nathaniel adjusted his cufflinks, custom gold, engraved with his initials, and turned away from the window. Send her in. The door opened, and everything changed. She walked in with the quiet strength of someone who had learned never to expect softness from the world. Elise Monroe, 24, petite, wore her nervousness like a pressed blazer, neat, controlled, but not entirely hidden. Her hair was pulled back in a tight twist. Her skin was a warm, deep bronze. Her blazer was one size too large, and her eyes looked like they hadn't slept in weeks, but they were clear and honest and unflinching. Miss Monroe, Victoria said, rising to greet her with a practiced smile. Please, have a seat. Elise nodded. Thank you. Her voice was soft, but not weak. She sat down, hands folded in her lap. Not submissive, disciplined. Nathaniel studied her. Most women in this room tried to impress, to perform, but Elise just existed quietly, completely. He cleared his throat. You understand the terms of the agreement? She nodded. Yes, sir. The compensation is 500, full medical coverage, a private residence for the duration of the pregnancy, a trust for postnatal support. Yes, sir. No hesitation, no gushing gratitude, just agreement. Victoria continued. The agency conducted all required evaluations. Physically, you're an excellent candidate. emotionally stable, no substance use, no disqualifying medical history. She glanced down at the folder in her lap, then paused. Elise, if I may ask, why did you agree to this? For the first time, the girl hesitated. Then she looked up, and in that moment, Nathaniel forgot how to breathe. Because my mother is dying. The words were delivered like a business report. Factual, flat, but the ache beneath them hummed like electricity. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The treatments he needs aren't covered by insurance. The experimental therapy. It might give her a chance. It costs more than I'll make in 10 years. Nathaniel felt his stomach twist. Not because he didn't believe her, but because he did. Elise wasn't here for fame, or luxury, or even stability. She was here for love. Fierce, desperate, self-sacrificing love. I'm sorry, he said quietly, and he meant it. Elise nodded. She's all I have. Victoria shifted uncomfortably. Yes, well, she said, straightening the stack of papers. We understand. Let's move on. But Nathaniel wasn't ready to move on. He was still thinking about the way Elise said, she's all I have, not as a plea, but a promise. He flipped through her file again. Fertility. Test. Check. Psychological evaluation. Check. Medical history. And then a single line. Subject has never been sexually active. He blinked. Miss Monroe, he said slowly. You've never. A flush crept up her neck, but she didn't lower her eyes. No, sir. I've never been with anyone. It wasn't an apology, Dot. It wasn't pride either. Just fact. Victoria made a noise of surprise. That's rare. Elise shrugged. I was busy. School, work, taking care of my MOM. And I never met anyone worth that part of me. That part. Nathaniel's throat tightened. Because suddenly, this wasn't about contracts anymore. This was a woman offering her body and something even more sacred for survival. And he was the man standing across from her with a pen. Excellent. Here's part 2 of the full narration only script. This continues the story in the same immersive tone and pacing. Combined with part 1, we're building toward the full 12,000 plus word goal. Silence stretched across the conference room like a storm front. Thick, electric, uncomfortable. Victoria broke it first. Well, her experience doesn't affect the medical procedure. IVF doesn't require prior intercourse, but Nathaniel raised a hand. Can we have the room? Victoria looked up, startled. Now? Yes. I'd like to speak with Miss Monroe privately. Elise's hands tensed slightly in her lap, but she said nothing. Victoria stood, smoothing her skirt with practiced poise. Very well. I'll be just outside. The door closed behind her with a soft click, and suddenly it was quiet, too quiet. Nathaniel leaned forward, his elbows on the glass table. His eyes, still grey and usually unreadable, looked directly at her. Elise. She straightened slightly. You don't have to call me sir, she said softly. You're not in the military. A faint smile tagged at the corner of his mouth. Force of habit, then, quieter. Why did you agree to this? She blinked. I told you. My mother, no. He interrupted gently. I don't mean why you need the money. I mean this. His voice dropped. You're a virgin, and you're agreeing to let strangers examine you, implant embryos, carry a child that's not yours. Let your first real physical experience be clinical. She didn't flinch, but he saw the flicker of pain behind her eyes. I'm not naive, Mr. King, she said. I know what this entails. I've read everything, talked to doctors. I've asked every question. I've weighed every risk. And you're still willing to go through with it? Yes. The word was soft, but absolute. Nathaniel sat back. I don't understand. Elise's gaze was calm, but her voice trembled just slightly. When you grow up watching someone you love die in slow motion when the bills pile up, and the air smells like antiseptic and fear, you learn fast. You learn that some things matter more than dignity, more than pride, more than dreams. She exhaled. My mother worked her whole life taking care of other people. She deserves a chance, even if it costs me everything. The room felt smaller, the weight of her words pressing against the windows, the walls, his ribs. He looked at her, really looked at her. This wasn't just a girl desperate for cash. This was a woman holding her world together with threadbare hope and blistered hands, and she was about to hand over the most intimate piece of herself to a man she didn't even know he owed him. Nathaniel stood, pacing toward the window. The skyline sparkled beyond the glass, cold, indifferent, like the man he'd trained himself to be. But something inside him cracked. I was prepared to go through with this, he said quietly. I thought it was just business. No different than acquiring a company or finalizing a deal. But you're not a contract, Elise. He turned. You're a person, a daughter, a fighter, and I can't do this to you. She froze. I don't understand. I mean, he said, walking toward his desk, this arrangement. It's over. Her face paled. You're cancelling it? Yes. She stood quickly, panic rising in her voice. No. Please, my mother's first treatment is in 2 weeks. I need the deposit by Friday, or they'll give her spot to someone else. I wasn't trying to manipulate you. I swear, Elise, he said gently, cutting her off. I'm not cancelling your hope. I'm cancelling the contract. He reached into his desk drawer, pulled out his personal checkbook, and began to write. The pen scratched softly on the paper. The air between them held its breath. He tore the check from the pad, folded it in half, and held it out. She didn't take it. What is that? $200,000. Her jaw dropped. I can't take that. We haven't signed anything. I haven't done anything for you. You showed me something I didn't know I was missing. He stepped closer. You showed me what love really looks like, what sacrifice means. You made me look in the mirror and see a man I'm not proud of. I've spent my whole life taking from people, Elise. Today, I want to give something back. She stared at the check like it might burn her fingers. But why? He didn't hesitate. Because someone who's willing to give up their entire future for their mother deserves more than money. They deserve protection, finally. With trembling hands, she took it. She clutched it to her chest like a lifeline. Like air, tears gathered in her eyes. I don't know what to say. He looked at her for a long moment, then said, just save her. It had been 4 days since she walked out of that glass-walled office with a folded check clutch in her palm and a life-saving miracle hidden in her coat pocket. 4 days since she walked away from the deal. But not from the man. Nathaniel had expected relief, expected to return to his spreadsheets and silence, expected her to become just another name in a file, folded away in a drawer of good intentions. But her voice lingered, her eyes, her courage.it haunted him.so when her name flashed across his phone screen that Thursday evening. He didn't hesitate. Mr. King, she said, I wanted to thank you properly for what you did. You don't need to thank me, he replied. Just tell me your mother's okay. She starts treatment Monday. But she wants to meet you. I didn't tell her everything. Just that you helped. There was a pause. Then softer. She wants to cook for you. The man who had eaten at Michelin-starred restaurants across 5 continents paused and then smiled. I'd be honored. Her apartment was small. Worn hardwood floors. A faded sofa. The scent of garlic and love hanging in the air. Grace Monroe opened the door herself, thin, tired, wrapped in a shawl that clung to her frame like a memory of strength. But her eyes were sharp, alive. She greeted him with warmth and suspicion. You're the man who saved my life, she said, narrowing her eyes. And you expect me to believe you don't want anything in return? Nathaniel shook her hand gently. I expected nothing, ma'am. But if you insist, a second helping of whatever that is in the oven might change my life again. Grace chuckled, but her gaze never stopped measuring him. He saw it. The mother bear, the dying protector, and he respected her for it. Dinner was loud and chaotic. Elise fussed in the kitchen, refusing help. Grace told stories about Elise as a child, as a teenager, as a girl who never asked for anything but gave everything. Nathaniel listened like a man watching sunlight for the first time. These people had nothing, and yet they had everything. He left that night changed, not because of the food, but because of what it meant to be let in, to sit at their table, to be trusted. Not as a billionaire, but as a man. 3 weeks passed. They texted, sometimes called, and one rainy evening, when Grace had a rough chemo session, Elise showed up in Nathaniel's office just to say thank you. No appointment, no expectations. That night, he walked her out under a shared umbrella, and when they reached her train stop, she kissed his cheek, not as payment, not as seduction, but as gratitude. And for the first time in his life, Nathaniel wished he could be more than what he was. Not a CEO, not a billionaire, not a broken man with power in his hands and nothing in his chest. He wanted to be worthy. A week later, she stood in his office again, this time with a folder in her hand. I have an idea, she said. IT was a non-profit proposal, a foundation to help families like hers. No red tape, no humiliation, just help. He read it twice. The budget was modest. The mission was clear. The passion in her writing was unmistakable. He looked up. What do you need from me? Her eyes widened. I wasn't asking for money. I just thought maybe I want in, he said simply, and just like that, it began. They called it the Grace Fund, named for the woman who inspired everything. Nathaniel gave the first $1 million. Elise became its director. They moved into an old brownstone in Brooklyn and turned it into an office with second-hand desks, thrifted furniture, and a coffee machine that groaned with every brew. But it was perfect. Every day, families came through that door looking for miracles, and sometimes they found them. More importantly, Elise smiled again, and every time she did, Nathaniel felt something shift in his chest. The first time he kissed her, it was accidental. They were reviewing a grant late one evening. She reached for a pen at the same time he did. Their hands brushed. She laughed, and he didn't think. He just leaned forward and kissed her, soft, careful, like asking a question. She didn't pull away. She kissed him back, and suddenly, it wasn't about the contract, or the money, or the guilt. What IT was about her. The girl who almost sold her future. The girl who had taught him what love looked like without ever using the word. They didn't talk about the kiss, not at first. The next morning, Elise showed up to the office as usual, early, focused, dressed in a simple navy blouse and flats that had seen better days. Nathaniel was already there, sipping coffee by the window, pretending to read a report he hadn't even flipped open. She walked in. He looked up. Their eyes met, and in that quiet space between them, something changed. Not awkwardness, not regret, just awareness of what had passed and what could be. Weeks passed. The foundation took off faster than either of them had predicted. Families wrote letters. Donors stepped up. A child received a new wheelchair. A mother got her medication covered. A father finally slept knowing the lights wouldn't be shut off again. And in the middle of it all, they stood together. Late nights reviewing proposals, early mornings fielding calls from hospitals. Elise worked with the focus of someone who had known scarcity too long. Nathaniel backed her with the steadiness of someone who had learned how to hold instead of control. They didn't need to talk about the kiss, because everything they did after it spoke louder. How he brushed her coat off the back of her chair, how she brought him tea without asking, how they sat closer now, how their laughs came easier. And yet, there was still a line, unspoken and uncrossed, a wall built from caution and difference. One night, after a board meeting, Elise lingered by the elevator. The office was quiet. The air outside buzzed with spring rain. Nathaniel leaned against the marble wall, tie loosened, fatigue showing in the slope of his shoulders. She looked at him carefully. "You're quiet tonight." "Just thinking." "About?" He hesitated, and then, without turning his head, "About what kind of man I am." She stepped closer, not touching him, but close enough for honesty. "You're the kind of man who could change my life with a transaction, and instead changed it with kindness." He turned now. "You don't think I did it out of guilt?" "I think guilt might have started it," she said, "but Grace finished it." She smiled softly. No pun intended. He almost laughed, but there was something behind his eyes she couldn't ignore, something afraid. "You still want a child," she said. He nodded. "I do, and a legacy." He nodded again. "It's what I've always wanted. Maybe the only thing I've ever wanted." She folded her arms. "And what if the legacy isn't a name or a bloodline, but the lives we've already changed?" He didn't respond. She stepped closer. "You don't need to create a child to prove you existed, Nathaniel. You already matter." "I want both," he admitted, then added, quieter, "but I want them with someone who chooses me. Not someone I pay, not someone I convince." The silence between them pulsed. Elise reached up, touched his face. "You want love?" He closed his eyes. "Yes." "And then do you think you could ever want that with me?" It wasn't a proposition. It wasn't flirtation. It was a question carved from hope and fear. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she took his hand, held it tightly. "I already do." That night, she didn't go home, and for the first time in both their lives, intimacy had nothing to do with sex. They sat in his living room, a fire lit, take-out boxes half eaten, music humming softly in the background. They talked about their childhoods, her first job, his first heartbreak, her mother's illness, his father's distance. She fell asleep with her head on his shoulder, and when he carried her to the guest room, she stirred only once. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me." The next morning, he cooked breakfast. Badly. She laughed when she saw the smoke curling from the edges of the omelette. "You're rich. You don't need to learn how to cook." "I'm trying. I can tell." He pulled out her chair. She sat. They ate, and the silence between them felt like something sacred. That afternoon, Elise sat in her mother's hospital room, reviewing applications from the Foundation's newest round of families. Grace studied her daughter's face. "You look lighter." "I feel it," Elise said. Grace smiled. "So, when are you going to tell me what's going on with you and Mr. Tall?" Brooding and impossible. Elise blushed. "I don't know if there's a what." "Not officially. Don't play coy with me, child. I was young once." Elise laughed and then grew serious. "I think I love him." "You think?" Elise looked at her mother, suddenly vulnerable. "I didn't mean to. I started seeing who he really was. Not the billionaire, not the boss. Just Nathaniel." Grace reached across the bed, took her daughter's hand. "Then love him, and let him love you back. Don't waste your time questioning something that feels that real." The news came on a Monday. Elise was halfway through a Zoom call with a regional children's hospital when her phone rang. Unknown number. Local area code. She ignored it. Then it rang again and again. She picked up. The nurse's voice was calm to calm. "Your mother collapsed in the hallway. We're stabilizing her, but she's asking for you." The world spun. Her stomach dropped. She didn't remember how she got to the hospital. Only that Nathaniel had insisted on driving. Only that he didn't let go of her hand once. Grace was pale, too pale. Her skin looked thin, translucent. Her eyes flickered with exhaustion Elise had never seen before. But when her daughter entered the room, she smiled weakly. "You made it." "I'm here," Elise whispered, kissing her mother's hand. Nathaniel stood back, silent, watching, waiting. The doctor explained the situation. The chemo had taken a toll. Her blood pressure had plummeted. They would need to monitor her closely for the next 48 hours. And even then, no promises. Elise didn't cry. She sat. She listened. She nodded. And then she stayed all night. Nathaniel left food, left water, sat in the hallway. She never left Grace's side. By morning, the worst had passed. Grace was stable again, sleeping deeply. Elise stepped into the hallway, eyes rimmed with red, skin blotched from silent tears. Nathaniel stood. She fell into his arms. They didn't speak for a long time. Finally, her voice broke through the quiet. I don't want to lose her. You won't. You don't know that. No, he admitted. But I know this. Whatever comes, you won't go through it alone. That night, Nathaniel took her to his penthouse. Not to impress her. To shield her. To give her quiet, rest, safety. She slept for 12 hours straight. When she woke, he was already in the kitchen, making coffee the way she liked it, weak, sweet. Too much cream. She walked over in his hoodie, barefoot, hair a mess, and when he looked at her, he thought this is what forever looks like. The next week brought good news. Grace's latest scans showed reduction in the tumor size. The new medication was working. It wasn't a miracle, but it was a start, and in that small victory, Nathaniel saw something bloom in Elise again. Hope, real, breathing, terrifying hope. They celebrated that night, takeout from her favorite taco truck, music echoing through his penthouse. She danced, barefoot on his hardwood floors. He watched her laughing, alive, and felt something in him settle. When she finally curled up next to him on the couch, she looked up. I need to tell you something. His chest tightened. Always with her, honesty came first. I thought I was falling in love with you, she said. Now I know I already have. He couldn't breathe. I love you, she said simply. Not because you saved my mother. Not because of what we've built. I love you because of how you look at me. Because of how you see me. He cupped her face and whispered the only words that had ever truly mattered. I love you back. They became inseparable. She moved into his space slowly, one drawer, one toothbrush, one worn hoodie at a time. Grace called Nathaniel son by accident one afternoon. He didn't correct her, neither did Elise. Then one morning, Nathaniel pulled out a small box from the inner pocket of his suit. She blinked. What's that? He opened it. A simple band. No diamonds. No spectacle. Just gold. Solid. Real. I don't need a ceremony. I don't need papers. But I need you, he said. She stared at the ring. Tears poured in her eyes. I want to marry you, he said. Not for legacy. Not for image. For us. She threw her arms around him. Yes, she said against his neck. Yes. 1,000 times yes. But fate wasn't done testing them. A week before their planned engagement party, a letter arrived from the agency. Legal remnants from the original surrogate agreement Elise had signed before the contract was voided. A clause buried in fine print. Something about exclusivity. Breach penalties. Binding intent. Elise sat frozen, reading the letter. She could be sued for breach of agreement, even though Nathaniel had cancelled the deal. It was legal madness. But in business, legality often outweighed morality. Nathaniel called every lawyer he knew. The best of them all told him the same thing. This could go away quietly with a settlement. But if it goes public, it could hurt your foundation, her reputation, your name. Elise sat across from him, calm. Too calm. What do we do? He asked. She met his eyes. We fight. Even if it goes public. She nodded. We didn't do anything wrong. You helped me. I helped you. We found something better than business. Nathaniel reached across the table, took her hand. This is what legacy really looks like, he said. Two people choosing each other, no matter what the cost. It was vicious. Speculative. It painted Elise as a gold digger, a manipulator, a woman who'd seduced her way into a billionaire's life, after backing out of a deal. The photo they used, a grainy shot of her carrying groceries with wind in her hair and exhaustion on her face. She looked human, and the internet ate her alive. Nathaniel's team wanted to get ahead of the story that meant press conferences, spokespeople, legal, threats, but Elise said no. She wouldn't fight this in tabloids. I'm not going to justify my love like it's a defense case, she said. If people want to believe lies, let them. We know what's real. Nathaniel had never loved her more. But the attacks didn't stop. Protesters showed up at the foundation. Donors threatened to pull out. The board demanded a public statement. Elise stepped down temporarily to protect the organization. Nathaniel offered to do it in her place. She refused. Let me fall on my sword, she said. I walked into this alone. I'll walk through this fire too, not alone, he said, gripping her hand. Never alone. The lawsuit came next, filed quietly. But it leaked. The agency accused her of breach of contract, emotional manipulation, and bad faith. The irony. She'd never taken $1 for herself. The $200,000 had gone to her mother's treatments, all documented, all verifiable. But legal systems didn't care about sentiment, only signatures. And her name was on that form. Even if Nathaniel had voided it later, they prepared for court. Elise refused to hide. She walked into the hearing in a black dress. No makeup, hair tied back. The judge asked her why she had broken the agreement. She said, I didn't break it. I was released. I never even started. There was no pregnancy, no exchange of services. I never took a cent for myself. Then quieter. The man sitting next to me didn't exploit me. He saved me. When the judge asked what she meant, she told the truth about the night she sat in that boardroom, about the moment she revealed her inexperience, about how Nathaniel had looked at her not with hunger, but horror, and how he'd chosen decency over power. The case was dismissed. There were no damages sought and no payout. The agency's reputation quietly collapsed within a month, and Elise, she didn't walk away untouched, but she walked away free. After the storm passed, something changed between them. Not love that had only deepened, but urgency. They had faced the fire and survived. There was no more waiting and no more pretending. Life was guaranteed. They married in a garden behind Gracie's new house. 30 guests. Laughter, vows whispered under string lights. When Nathaniel said, I do, his voice cracked. When Elise said, I will, her mother sobbed with pride. There was no press and no press release. Just two people choosing forever. Quietly. Their first year as husband and wife was not easy. Grace had a relapse scare. Elise had panic attacks she couldn't always explain. Nathaniel sometimes fell into long silences, haunted by guilt he didn't know how to name, but they faced it all together. He learned how to be soft. She learned how to ask for help together. They rebuilt. The Grace Foundation went national, 5 offices. Over 300 families helped. Elise spoke at women's shelters. Nathaniel taught financial literacy at high schools. People called it their image rehab, but they didn't care because the only people they answered to were each other and the lives they touched. One morning, 2 years later, Elise stood on their balcony, barefoot, hands on her belly. The test had been positive. She hadn't planned it. She wasn't even sure she believed it at first. She told him that evening. Over dinner, Nathaniel dropped his fork. He looked at her with stunned silence, and then tears. The man who had tried to buy an heir once was now given one for free 9 months later. They named their daughter Hope, because that's what she was, and because that's what Elise had taught him to believe in. Nathaniel never stopped building, but his legacy didn't. Wear a suit. It wore pigtails and laughed like sunshine. And Elise, she never stopped fighting, but she no longer had to do it alone. because some love stories don't begin in romance. They begin in desperation, and they bloom slowly, bravely into something holy, something whole. Sometimes the life you were meant for begins when everything else falls apart. He wanted a child, she wanted a miracle. They found something better. Each other, not a transaction, not a fantasy, but a love story built in fire and sealed in grace.